You're listening to America's Web
You're
Radio
listening
online.
to America's Web
Thanks for
Radio
tuning
on
in.
the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Good morning.
Well, good morning, everybody.
America's
Joe.
Web Radio, and you know, as any good grunt would be, one has to be a little bit nervous in the presence of a general, and I will only use that term once because a colonel and a captain, as a matter of fact, the captain first embarrassed me in front of the troops by saying I didn't know any better, and they hadn't taught me any better at the time, but I yelled, "Hey, Captain," and boy, was that a mistake. And in front of the troops, I was dressed down royally that a grunt, a private at the time, does not address an officer as his rank. You address him as sir. End of statement. So we are delighted to have General Richard Dix on, a native of Atlanta, as a matter of fact. I guess native, is that
Yes.
right? Okay, Brookhaven.
Born and raised.
Born and raised.
Yep.
You're really strange. You're different from most of the folks. That I invaded Atlanta from Texas, and here you are, a native, and went to high school at
Columbia High School in Decatur.
Okay. And then you went to South Carolina State.
Yes, sir.
Did you go? Oh, please don't do that. Just because I'm older than dirt, but I feel I'm embarrassed for you to say sir to me. But anyway, so then were you in ROTC?
Yes, distinguished military graduate from South Carolina State's ROTC department.
Wow. Well, congratulations. Do you? I think it's the Gamecocks, right?
No, it's the Bulldogs.
Bulldogs.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So we're about 40 miles down the road from the Gamecocks.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you beat my alma mater anyway, Texas Tech. So we'll leave it at that. We won't get into football, but folks, I am really honored to have General Dix in the studio today, and I want to thank Rick White, Colonel White. He's helped the station out many, many times, and he's the executive director of the Georgia Military Hall of Fame.
Yes.
And you were inducted in 2018.
2018.
And, you know, let me put it like this. You got to be somebody to be inducted into the Military Hall of Fame. And so I think that's the beginning and the end of this interview. We've got a very distinguished gentleman in our presence. And you served 3 tours in
Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. Let's just go through your life, sort of. Like you were saying, I did it, but when I was a kid, but then I decided, no, I don't think they're using real bullets in Vietnam. I don't think this is necessarily what I want to do. But we all play with our rifles and weapons and stuff, and you said you were doing that as a kid.
Yes.
And
there was a unique story. When I was about 18 months, my godfather was preparing to go to Vietnam, and that was Sergeant Willie Twilley. And he bent down in the crib to kiss me goodbye, and his dog tags fell out. And as the story goes, I grabbed the dog tags and wouldn't let him go. So he had to take the dog tags off, wait for me to fall asleep, and then he took the dog tags and deployed to Vietnam. A year later, he came back, and the first thing I did was I patted him on his chest looking for his dog tags. So he took them off and put them around my neck, and he told my mom and dad, he said, hey, this young man's going to be in the Army one day, and, he's going to do some things that are going to surprise us. So, some 45, 50 years later, here I am.
Okay, now I got to ask, did they have the rubber protection on them? On the dog tags?
Yeah, he did.
Or whatever. I don't know that it was rubber necessarily, but the white plastic stuff or the...
Yeah, and in those days, they had the clear plastic,
yeah.
And the dog tags fit right in them.
So they wouldn't rattle.
Right.
But a few people let them rattle anyway. But and then some people, like we were talking about our former Secretary of State that didn't know how to operate a grenade. So we won't go into that. But anyway, we were discussing his fate the other day. So 3 tours, and at what point? Well, you were in ROTC, so you came out a second lieutenant?
Yes.
And went right into?
To Fort Stewart, Georgia. So when I came out of college, I went straight to Fort Knox. I was an armor officer. So I went to 24th ID with General McCaffrey as a tank platoon leader for 369 Armor at Fort Stewart, Georgia. Trained for 3 years, and right when Desert Storm, we were alerted, I got transferred from the Armor Corps to the Quartermaster Corps. So I went to the Division Support Command probably about a week or two before we deployed. And so I deployed with 224 Forward Support Battalion out of Fort Stewart. And I was their Recon Platoon and Alpha Company ammo platoon leader. And so during Desert Storm, I was injured in an IED strike and hurt my lower back. And so I was medevaced to Landstuhl, Germany, received treatment, and then returned back to Desert Storm to go across the berm with my unit. And so I went on a couple of night patrols that, kind of put the unit in jeopardy, but we came through unscathed. And, I turned down a Valor award because I thought I was just doing my job, and that was to protect my people and get them back to Fort Stewart, Georgia. I didn't see it as doing anything extraordinary. And that's pretty much how the career has gone over the 34 years that I've served. So 4 years as a ROTC scholarship student, and then 30 years on active duty. And I've loved every minute of it. I was asked by parents on several occasions, when you graduated, you had a job, and I'm like, no, I had a craft that I loved. And for the last 30 years, I haven't worked a day in my life. So, it's a love, it's a passion. And in today's forces, just like the people that went to Vietnam, there is a calling. And when you're called, you answer that call. And that's what today's national treasure, the young men and women that we send to combat, that's what they're doing. They're answering that call. And there's no greater love than a man that he's willing to lay down his life for his fellow man. And I believe in that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, that's, the name Tano Pirano?
Mm-hmm.
Tano became an acquaintance, not a friend, but an acquaintance, and that's his motto, is it from the Bible, no greater call. And as you look back on it, and I don't fault the United States. I love the United States, but if there's a fault, it's that we've never, in my opinion, had a good or accurate foreign policy and or understanding of what we're going into. It was like Vietnam. Oh my God, what's all this green stuff? It's a jungle, and we weren't really initially training for jungle activity,
right?
And it was every in somebody's mind somewhere, every war is on a clear plain like it was during the Revolution, and you shoot at each other, maybe hide behind a tree if you're lucky. But then we get into Afghanistan and the Gulf War and Desert Storm and Desert Shield and all that, and I guess part of the closest was when the Viet Cong would redirect the Claymore mines at us. But I don't think, or well, you can tell me, I don't know, but I don't think there was and the Viet Cong did it, but they didn't call them IEDs, and we all of a sudden were having casualties
Right.
in with IEDs, and somebody said, "Oh, well, we've got these new Jeep things called Humvees, and gee, maybe we ought to put some extra material in so they won't get damaged."
Right.
Like, were you in a Humvee when
we were in a Cutby, so it was a Ford Ranger that had been militarized, but it did what it was supposed to do. We hit a anti-personnel mine, so we were very fortunate. Had it been an anti-armor, you and I would not be having this conversation here today.
No.
But one of the things, David, that you got to understand is that warfare evolves. Man evolves, and when you went from the plains of Waterloo in Europe, and you fought standing armies, across those valleys. With the evolution, so does our tactics, techniques, and procedures have to evolve. And, I over the last 30 years, the military has done a great job of preparing for the evolution of warfare with the National Training Center out in Fort Irwin, California, and the JROTC facility out in Louisiana. And it teaches you, open desert warfare, which is the Middle East. It teaches you some of the Hindu Kush in the mountains of Afghanistan, where we learned some valuable lessons. I was a part of the evaluation team that switched the military uniforms from the old digital pattern to the new UCP pattern that blends in to the mountains of Afghanistan.
I was part of it when they changed the insignias and took the butter bars off and made them camouflage.
Absolutely. I'm grateful for that, trust me.
They made good targets.
Yep, absolutely. And, that's what the people back home didn't understand. It's like, why are you guys switching your uniform? I'm like, you don't understand. When you're in that environment, you stick out like a sore thumb. And we were losing a lot of soldiers because of that digital pattern.
I visited Fort Stewart. Right at the time, somebody said, "Duh, we've got green vehicles, OD green vehicles in the Middle East. Maybe we should change the color of them to blend in with the sand." Duh. And I was at Fort Stewart right when they were repainting all of the vehicles and making them more. They should have just made them stealthy instead of even sandy. But, and this is, again, I get on my soapbox, and I'm sorry, and I try not to get too political, but it irks me totally. My feeling is we should not have anyone in Congress or any place else that hasn't served their country at some point. And for somebody like Feinstein or Pelosi or some of the people that are on stupidly on Armed Service Committee or whatever that vote, terms of engagement. I'm sorry, but that's baloney. If somebody's shooting at you, I'm not going to go check their ID and see if they're old enough to carry a gun. I just want to shoot back, and that's what we're trained to do.
Right.
And I think everybody should serve their country in some shape, form, or fashion, and particularly if they're on any kind of committee, they should have served and know what it's like. And then you wouldn't have the question on the uniform; it would have been an automatic yes.
Well, I'm not a politician, I'm a soldier, but, when you think about raising your right hand and swearing an oath and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, you understand what the framers intended when they built and constructed the Constitution and how it's evolved over the years. Everything it has a checks and balance. A lot of the veterans that served, they're dying out or they're retiring out of Congress, and a lot of the current veterans are not stepping up in the big numbers to fill some of those gaps. So you have both a veteran and a non-veteran. And I think when you can find that balance, and we operate as one America, then it can kind of placate some of the pitfalls that we see in today's environment. The rules of engagement are just that. They're rules of engagement that are applied, and once you apply them and you're in combat, you return fire, but we're trained to be above and beyond those that we engage on the battlefield. They have no rules. They have no rules of engagement. The extremists that we fought in the Middle East, they want to destroy our way of life in the West, period. There's no negotiating. They won't stop. That's all they believe in. So it's our duty and responsibility to answer that call, and that's why 3 tours in Afghanistan, every time I went with no problem, because I have an 18-year-old daughter that's in college. And when I think of the things that they do to women in that part of the world, it was my sworn duty to make sure that didn't happen here in the United States.
With that being said, we're going to take our first break, and our first break is going to be very fast in that we're going to talk about your induction into the Georgia Military Hall of Fame. Until I went to Johns Creek Veterans Association meeting, I didn't even know that there was a Georgia Military Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. And the folks that have put it together, one of them being Colonel Rick Wright, retired, White, not Wright, but White, Rick White, and he's done a fantastic job. And you were inducted in 2018 for Valor, I believe?
No, for achievement.
Oh, achievement,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
So it's Valor, Achievement, and Service.
And they're having their 7th annual
banquet and induction ceremony on 2 November.
2 November, right. Mm-hmm. And that'll be in Columbus, Georgia. And if at all possible, I'm going to try to get to it. And they said, I was talking to Rick yesterday, and he said, if you come down, be sure and bring your own box of Kleenex.
Yes, definite.
It's that moving. And,
absolutely.
I think it's great that we have it, and I think what they're doing in Texas as well, in Arlington, mm-hmm. The Medal of Honor Museum, mm-hmm. I think is super. And it's come a long ways from Vietnam.
Absolutely.
And as I was thinking about today's show, though, I was wondering, has Desert Storm and Desert Shield already been somewhat forgotten?
Yeah, I think it's being overshadowed by the fight against ISIS, Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and OIF in Iraq, and the things that are going on in the Middle East. For me personally, I think it's cyclic. Vietnam ran a cycle, and those veterans that stayed on active duty transitioned and began to train us in the early 80s when I came into the military, and and then they retired, and then Desert Storm occurred, and now it's ran its full cycle. A lot of those veterans are retired, and now you have the majority of those serving right now were on the probably on the fringe of Desert Storm, but definitely have spent a lot of time in Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait in the Middle East. And, so we still rely on the lessons learned from, World War I, II, Korea, Vietnam, and Desert Storm, because those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. And we try to avoid that at all costs.
I think we had such a misconception, and I'm a little older than you, but I think people have a misconception. Maybe it's because of TV and westerns or TVs and John Wayne in the military or whatever, but that it's that a war is a clean fought thing, and that it's a gentleman's war. It's almost like a duel or whatever. And it ain't.
Nobody.
It's kill or be killed, and what's the old saying about how many people become religious in a foxhole? And and I would be. We're sort of going to play with this commercial thing today. I own it. I can do what I want to with it. So, we will pump up the Georgia Military Hall of Fame. But beyond that, I'm just enjoying sitting in the same room with you. I've got to ask about Schwarzkopf, Starman Norman. He was everybody's hero. I
Absolutely.
think. And I guess his funniest line was, when the bomb went off and blew on the road, and the guy went into many bits and pieces. He's not having a good day.
Yeah.
And
he was a larger-than-life figure. I met him probably about 2 or 3 weeks before we went into southern Iraq and began the attack. And, very detailed-oriented, was a people person, a soldier's leader. And, we all looked up to him. There were things that you encounter in combat when you deploy and you leave home station. He was determined to make sure that everybody was treated fairly, and we were on one accord. And we remembered that the Iraqis and Saddam Hussein was the enemy, not anybody within our own formations and stuff. And that was crucial because we weren't that far removed from ending segregation in the military, and so. The things that leaders do when they promote team first and being on one accord is just like in that foxhole. Everybody gains religion. There are no southern or northern biases that you bring into the foxhole. It's your brother or your sister to your left or right, and you depend on each other to get back home. And I think that's the best of what America brings to the table. We're the greatest nation on earth that can bring everybody from every walk of life, train them, station them around the world, and then when the nation calls on them, they answer that call, and that's huge.
And I think, again, someone that hasn't served doesn't realize that the military is the biggest fraternity, sorority in the world, and no matter what your position was or is, you're still brothers and sisters in the military.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter which branch or anything else. You're still all the same. And I didn't go to Vietnam, but I was in that era of Vietnam when it was really not that safe to wear your uniform through the airport even. But
it was a shame.
Yeah, it was crazy because my friends and our brothers were being killed, and if nothing else, you respect the dead.
Absolutely. And you guys were asked to go. And what people don't realize is everybody thinks that those that went to Vietnam, they went because of the draft, and that's untrue.
That's right.
A lot of the folks that deployed volunteered, and they answered a call, and the country was being threatened. For politics aside, the country was being threatened, and communism was threatening taking over the world, and we, as a free people, could not allow that to happen. So they volunteered to go. And when I speak to young people around the country, I told them, I said, hey, I belong to the greatest team God has ever assembled and put on this earth. It's the military of the United States. And, when I come into an environment and young people are, not paying attention and they're not listening, I get their attention. And I tell them, I say, hey, I'll come back with my brothers and sisters, and, we'll show you what a real team looks like, and a band of brothers and sisters that are willing to make sure that you have the right to do everything that you want to do, and you can go to school. So the respect that you can give to me is pay attention and, do your part, and that is get through school, graduate, and become a productive citizen, no matter what you do. And a lot of parents thought, well, you're advertising for the military. No, that's a calling. Your son or your daughter has to have that calling. If they've got it, then I'll perpetuate it. I said, but other than that, I'm looking for people that want to go into society and be effective and productive and help this country prosper. And, that's what we need to get into. Now, a lot of people are advocating to bring the draft back or mandatory service for at least 2 or 3 years. I don't think we're quite at that point yet. But, I'll tell you this, the military brings discipline. And it turns boys into men and young girls into women. And, it is an honorable profession. I think when you take that survey, they're still held in very high regard. And I think the first responders are right behind the U.S. military. So when I see first responders, I thank them guys for being on the front lines on a daily basis. I used to tell them, hey, we only go on special occasions. You guys do it every day. And, if more Americans believed and thought that way, we wouldn't have a lot of the disconnects that we have in today's environment. But, that's what a democracy is about.
You hit something that I couldn't agree with you more is that, and I saw it, when I was in active duty or going through basic and AIT, I was at the very end of the draft, and they'd started the lottery, and I was number 12, so I was going to go one way or the other. But and this is the word discipline, and I look at the kids today, and they're not kids. They're in their 20s, late 20s, and they're millennials. No, they're lazy, and their parents haven't done their job of disciplining them. And I think they should be the first ones sent into the military, and the discipline and they'll put you in your place real quick when you get that first haircut, and everybody's bald and looks the same.
Yep,
no
absolutely.
Matter how tall or how short you are, you still got the bald head. And I just, the military is the greatest thing ever. The other thing that bothers me is where we are with NASA and space technology. I think NASA after Kennedy in the 60s and 70s did more for our world than most people will ever understand.
Absolutely.
And the tools and the knowledge that we gained from the space program reflected in everything. I mean, even to the manufacture of the M16, the plastic or the whatever is used, and the metals that were used and the information that we gained was extraordinary. And I wish that we were right back in the space age again, and developing, and our warfare, who knows where we're going to be with that.
Oh, yeah. It spawned the GPS technology, that has both a military application and a civilian application, and we'd be lost without it, because on your smartphones now, that's the first app that you hit when you get in the car is that GPS to find out where you're going and stuff. Now, getting back to the young people, I would say that, there is a sea change. We're seeing a lot of those 20-somethings join the military. But you got to understand that when the economy's going good and there are jobs and things of that nature out there, you normally have that natural shift to the civilian economic side of the house, and not a lot of people of an older age coming into the military. When the economy's down, you see a sea change back in the other direction, where you have a lot of 20-somethings to early 30s joining the military. One of the things that I saw about 2 years ago before I came off active duty is I saw that sea change kind of upticking in a good economy, which, you thought is kind of strange. But it signaled that the military was clicking on all cylinders and doing a good job of telling the American people the opportunities, the things that are available, what you can have. And so you saw a lot of college students saying, hey, I really want to be a microbiologist in this particular field. Oh, wait a minute. The military has that service. Let me see. Do I want to go and be on fries or be in the kitchen, or do I want to work microbiology in a certain aspect? And, so you saw that directing that sea change. I'm one of those proponents that he who tells his story first and tells it best carries the day. And we as a military and we as a nation have got to get back to telling that story. I think when you don't tell your story and that narrative is put out by somebody else, then you kind of lose that momentum, or, somebody else is seizing the day and the correct message doesn't get out.
But the pay scale has changed considerably. Mm-hmm. And, particularly if you're an officer, mm-hmm. It's fairly competitive. Not fairly, it is competitive. Mm-hmm. And,
it is. A lot of people, when I'm traveling around the country, they engage, and I say, hey, but when you look at the Fortune 500 companies, which, the military is comparable to, and you compare their salaries to what we get and the bonuses and the other perks, there's still a significant imbalance. But, I tell people, you got to understand, that's not the job of the military. The job of the military is not to get paid like a Fortune 500 company. It's to defend this country and the United States Constitution and be willing to protect it from enemies, foreign and domestic, and to be on a moment's call. So, there's no overtime. Our hours are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And, it all drives you back to that calling. If you have that calling, then you're willing to sacrifice. And, your families are willing to sacrifice because it's a team effort. I am grateful that, my wife of 21 years plus has been by my side for every deployment. I deployed 4 days after our daughter was born from Kaiserslautern, Germany to Croatia and Bosnia. And I was gone for 6 months. The family came over, her parents, my parents came over to help her out in a foreign land. And, but the other American families that were stationed with us, they all banded together and said, hey, you go do what you have to do in deployment. We'll take care of your family. And, that's the greatest part of being in a military family, is that extended family.
And the term that came up in Vietnam was, I got your six.
That's it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, and for folks that don't know what that means, it means I got your back, and they came out with I got your six, and and they do. Like you said, it's the biggest family in the world, mm-hmm. and you've always got a friend in the military.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's amazing how it works. Unless you're a real screw up, you got a friend in the military.
Absolutely. And the beauty behind that, David, is you can not see somebody for 10 or 15 years. And when you see them, it's almost as if, hey, I saw you yesterday, and you pick up immediately, on a bonding and a great conversation that when people are watching two people interact and like, hey, so, man, you guys are, no, I hadn't seen them in 15 years, but it's just like, hey, we were just together yesterday. And that's that true bond. A lot of it is forged in combat, but more importantly, a lot of it is, forged in peacetime. Different deployments around the world when you're away from home, and home is forward in South Korea or a Germany or England, and the one thing that you have in common is that you're American, and no one can take that from you, and that sense of pride and the understanding that you're a part of something greater, and it drives you to be the best that you can be.
And you can appreciate more than I can, but when you become short, if they had your back before, they got your back even more.
Mm-hmm.
The last 10 days of being short, you're covered by everybody.
Absolutely.
And so with that being said, we should take a break, but I want to take a break, a very strange break, and ask you what it has meant and what it was like to be inducted into the Georgia Military Hall of Fame.
Being inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame was definitely a dream come true. The last 30 years of service were just that. It was 30 years of service to a greater call, and to come home after 30 years being stationed around the world and settling back into Georgia and then being nominated. Just the nomination alone, I was like, who, me? A little kid from Linwood Park, Brookhaven, Georgia, who moved out into Decatur at a young age and finished out there and graduated from Columbia High School. You guys want to put me in a Hall of Fame? And they were like, yeah, we think you deserve to be in that Hall of Fame. And, that ceremony last November, when Rick tells you to bring a box of Kleenexes, that's exactly what you got to do. Because when you hear the citations for valor, for service and achievement, but more importantly for valor, and knowing that, there were some extenuating circumstances in combat where, a person laid down their life to make sure that their buddies could return home and, never to return home themselves. It was humbling. And, I kept telling the other nominees that were inducted, I felt like I wasn't worthy, and they were like, hey, General, I don't think you understand, 6 tours into combat and, a couple of close calls, but leading anywhere from 200 to 73,000 in combat, that's huge. And, having the deployed response from the United States to save West Africa from Ebola out of your unit and putting those people into West Africa to stop Ebola was huge. And, Rick pulled me to the side and he said, hey, this Hall of Fame is about achievement. It's about service, and it's about valor. And if we did valor alone, we would do a disservice to those who serve. And, I stopped and I thought about that, and when I think those that served during the Vietnam era, a lot of people say, hey, wait a minute, I didn't go to Vietnam and I didn't get shot at, and I'm like, no, it's more than that. You supported those that did, but more importantly, you were willing to go. Your number just didn't get called, or, divine intervention sent you somewhere else instead of going directly into harm's way. And, when you think about it, it takes a team to get things done. Those that are in direct combat, those that are just beyond the front lines, that support those that are at the front line, and those that are in, home station and support from around the world. It takes everybody to get the job done. And that was one of the ways that I could deal with the honor and the humility that was necessary, that's carried me over the last 30 years, and understanding that you're being inducted into something. And when I walked into the plaza across from the state capitol, and I saw the frame on the wall, I was like, wow, And I had a couple of classmates from Columbia High School that work at the state capitol, and they've come and they were at the unveiling ceremony, And they were like, wow, I knew him when, and he's going into the Hall of Fame, but he's going to be on this wall forever. And a young lady, she said, do you understand that future generations of your family are going to come and visit this memorial or this Hall of Fame, and they're going to see your frame on the wall? What does that really mean? And that, I told her, I said, well, for me personally, it meant that I did something right, and I was willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice. And, I'm honored to be considered among the other 16 that went in with me last year.
Folks, let me tell you something. This has been probably one of the largest pleasures I've ever had in my life, of sitting across from General Dix. And as a grunt back when, I didn't obviously wasn't associating with folks like General Dix, and I wasn't asked to their parties. But here is a gentleman that is, you just exhume in leadership, and if I were to walk in the room and didn't know who you were, I think I would still pop to attention and salute you. And I wish I had a cover on right now. I would have had the last hour would have been with a salute. It's what makes generals generals and officers officers, is their ability to lead and ability to do what you've done. Mm-hmm. And it's just incredible. And I had the same feeling towards Donna when she came in, mm-hmm. Donna Rowe. Yep. And she was a nurse in combat. And, Vietnam taught us all a lot. And unfortunately, it didn't teach some of the public what it should have, or I wished it had. But
we're making up for it now, though, David.
Yeah, we are.
The administration developed back in 2012 the Vietnam commemoration, mm-hmm. and the pin, the lapel pin, the decal for the cars, and the citation. I participated on the Army staff at the Pentagon to develop that program along with Lieutenant General Kicklighter. And let me tell you, that's the greatest pleasure that I've had over the last 6 years, is to go around the country to say, hey, we have not forgotten your service. And we want to take a moment on behalf of this great nation to say thank you. We didn't say it in the 60s when you guys came home, but we're going to say it now, and we've gotten it right. And, we can't go back in time and erase those bad memories and, the nation's behavior at that point in time. But we can, in this day and time, say thank you and welcome you back home. So on behalf of a grateful nation, let me welcome you back home. And, let me say your program and what you do to honor veterans, we stand on your shoulders. We wouldn't be here if it had not been for you, and it had not been for my godfather, Mr. Twilly, and his service, those uncles that I have, the aunts and cousins that have gone before me. And, one of the things I used to tell my soldiers is you got to love it. You got to want to be here. It's hard, but it's fair. It's sad, but it's true. Not everybody can do what the United States Army can do. And, I've said that in some tough moments and at some tough times. And, it's carried us through. And, if you believe in a higher calling and you've got that religion out of the foxhole or in the foxhole or before you deploy, then, you carry that and you believe that everything's going to be all right, because you understand that in order to keep the American way of life, you've got to be willing to sacrifice. And you guys proved that in Vietnam. And, from the bottom of my heart, let me say thank you.
Well, America's Web Radio and me personally thanks you for the leadership that you've shown and what you've done in the military. It's just outstanding, and you've broken many barriers, and I don't want to bring that up, but you crossed lines that needed to be crossed, and I congratulate you. And if there's anybody that's deserved the Hall of Fame, I hope my new friend Richard Dix.
Definitely.
And the military is great, and I support it, and we support what's going on now. And as I mentioned, I have a son in Germany serving, and he's in the Air Force. And my wife and I have talked about it, or when we were together we did, that you hit it on the head. Robert, our son, he has a calling for it, and that's, and what his duty was, and I've respected him from the get-go and not asked him what he was doing, because it's the old saying, well, if I could tell you, Dad, but then I'd have to kill you. And and
he's been taught well.
Yeah, and I respect he and his classmates from Texas A&M that were in the Corps and went on into the service afterwards. It's just, do you feel like we're getting to the younger generation, and so we're getting them in?
Yeah.
And I like I said, I was at the tail end of the draft and went through some of my basic with draftees, and I'm not even sure who came up. I guess it was Johnson, or in the 60s when they came up with doing away with the draft. But I personally think it's the best thing we get, or what I saw was the cream of the crop.
Right.
And a person that's dedicated and wants to join, like you said, they know what they're doing, and they're the best.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not putting down draftees, but at the same token, I saw it firsthand. And my first platoon sergeant was sort of blown away. He was very proud of his high school diploma, and yet my first platoon, everybody was a college graduate.
Yep.
And where the military is do it over and over and over again until you do it right.
Right.
And we did it right the second time, and that sort of messed up their heads.
Right. Absolutely.
But
you asked if they're listening. There are great examples all around the United States. When you go to these training bases like Fort Jackson or Fort Lee or Fort Benning, and you see these young men and women, and they're coming in droves.
They're crazy that go to Benning. Nobody should. You don't jump out of a good plane.
Absolutely, absolutely. But you see, it's like parenting. I asked my mom one time. I said, "Man, I don't think I'm getting through to my son. He's just, and she said, "Hey, not everybody is on the same wavelength as you are, but he's listening. It's just going to take a little bit longer for that light switch to turn on." And she was exactly right, And today's youngsters are just like that, But they demand so much more out of the leadership, So the leadership has to evolve, and they have to, get better at what they do, from the drill sergeants all the way up to the general officers and stuff. And you've got to be more in tune to the technology, the environment, how it's employed, where it's being employed. And these young people got ideas, and they come from a digital world, so they're bringing a lot of new insight in there. And it takes the military just a little bit of time to change out of that, the old Atari game system to the new Xbox. And so my answer is they're listening. And to the parents out there in your audience, don't be afraid to let them realize their dreams. If they want to serve, let them serve. And if you believe, like I believe, that God orders all of our steps, and there are no coincidences, and you put your faith where your faith needs to be, then God will do what he does best, and he'll take care of them. But, those that have a chance to serve in the military, they come back so well-rounded. Leadership is instilled, or it's nurtured, or it's expanded, and they come back and they enhance our society. And, there's no better enhancement than you can have. And they're starting to get back into Congress, so that's a good thing, But my message to everybody is, hey, we have to do our job. If each person does to the left or the right, if they do their job, then everything that we need in this country will be all right. And we'll get what we need. We'll go where we need to go as a nation. And we'll be that shining light on the hill that we've been for so many years to so many countries around this great world, And we just need to get back to the basics. We take care of home. We treat each other with respect and dignity. We take care of each other. And, we believe in God we trust, and it's not just a slogan. It's a way of life that you've got to employ on a daily basis. And we just got to do what we got to do, and we'll be just fine.
It can't be taken off our coins or off of our buildings or anything else. We've got to fight for that.
I agree.
I guess where I miss the boat is I can't understand anyone stepping on my flag or taking "In God We Trust" off of our coins or our buildings or anything else.
Yeah.
I don't understand their thinking.
But the beauty is that the framers and the forefathers they understood that not everybody was going to see it our way.
True.
And they left a little play in the Constitution in the left and right to give you that right. So, when people ask, what's my opinion on this or that, I have no opinion. I'm a United States soldier. I raised my right hand, I volunteered, and I answer to the Constitution of the United States. I will defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I'm willing to give my life. So that means to me that that guy that steps on the flag, or that guy or gal that doesn't see things quite our way, then okay, I'm gonna respect that to a certain degree. But boy, if you do things and you're a domestic or a foreign threat, then you've got an issue. And because I've sworn an oath to protect this country, and there are hundreds of thousands of men and women that are on active duty right now that will answer that call on a moment's notice. And so I would be remiss if I didn't invite folks out to the 7th annual gala where we're inducting or announcing this year's class of 15 into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame.
Do you have the list there?
Yes, sir.
You want to run through it right quick?
Yeah, let me see if I can. 15 that are going in. Let's see if I can pull it up and get technology to work for today.
I've got the names here if you want them.
Okay. Yep, here you go. We've got for valor, achievement, and service. We've got Gregory Kemp. He's going in for service. He was a United States Army colonel, retired. He fought in Vietnam. We've got Wendy Bryan Carpenter, achievement, United States Navy Rear Admiral, and she's from Atlanta. We've got Richard Francis Dundon. He's going in for valor, United States Army Staff Sergeant. He fought in Vietnam. He's from Johns Creek. We've got Bertley Van Zant, England Jr., and he's going in for valor. He was a U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant in Vietnam. He's from Marietta. We've got Ray Ralph Fairman. He's going in for service, United States Marine Corps. He was a CW-4, fought in Vietnam, Desert Storm, and served in, he's from Athens, Georgia. We've got James Adrian Guest. He's going in for valor, U.S. Army, Major General, fought in Vietnam, 2 tours, and he's from Tatoa, Georgia. We've got Jason Harkins. He's going in for valor, United States Army sergeant. He fought in Iraq and was killed in action. He's from Cleveland, Georgia. We've got James Charles King. He's going in for valor, U.S. Army, first lieutenant, served in Vietnam. He's from Griffin, Georgia. Edmund Nicholas Marks, Jr., valor, United States Marine Corps, sergeant, Korea, St. Mary's, Georgia. Charles Henry Jr., Monroe, valor, United States Marine Corps, corporal, fought in Korea, and he's from Savannah, Georgia. Clyde Vernon Moore, valor, United States Army, first lieutenant, Vietnam. He's from Irvinville, and he was killed in action. James Armit Scott III, valor, United States Army, lieutenant colonel, retired, Vietnam. He's from Royston, Georgia. Philip Baldwin Smith, valor, United States Army, first lieutenant, Vietnam, Griffin, Georgia. Jack Cox Wheeler, service, United States Army, Major General, Vietnam. He's from Fayetteville, Georgia. And Roger William Wise Jr., service, United States Army, sergeant, and he's from Roswell. All 15 will be announced on 2 November. And the ceremony is going to take place at 6 p.m. at St. Luke Ministry Center, 301 11th Street in Columbus, Georgia. It's an annual event that's open to the public, and the prices are individuals are $55, and you can pay at the door. All donations go back to the 501c of the Georgia Military Veteran Hall of Fame to continue the Hall of Fame and the great work. So those are the 15 inductees for the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame class of 2019. And if you know of someone that is deserving, all applications can be found on the website, and they are due the last Friday of August. And the 2020 class will be announced next October, and they will go in for enshrinement 2 November, like this year's class.
I don't want the show to stop, but we're at the end of the hour, and all I can do is thank you, and I wish everybody could be in the room with you, and the feeling that you put off is just absolutely incredible. And I've been honored to be sitting across and be able to look at you, and the one thought that kept going through my mind was, I wish I could have served under you. And the people that did should be flattered and honored that they had a man like yourself, the dedicated man that you are, as their leader. And I'm sure they appreciated it up and down the gambit. And you're incredible. Will you come back?
I sure will. And thank you for everything that you do, David. This is a great show. Thank you.
We just respect the military, but we don't do near the things that you've done and the things that you are doing for the military. With that being said, folks, we're going to have to do the proverbial put the plug in the jug and get out of here. But again, I want to thank General Richard Dix for coming in and being with us. And this sounds crazy, but I'm looking forward already to the next time.
Cool.
And we might just have to go get some Mexican food out there in Johns Creek and then come over here or something.
And do it again? I'm all for it.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.